Welcome to Nintendo Voice Chat for the week of March 7th, 2015. I am Jose Otero, and we have a very special treat for you today, but let me introduce our regulars. So we have Brian Altano.
What's up?
We have Schneider.
Hello.
And we have comedian, writer for The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, formerly of Nintendo Treehouse and IGN. Welcome, Mike Drucker.
Hello.
So good to have you on the show, man.
Thank you
We're
for
really
having me.
excited.
They
Yeah.
put all the bald guys on one side of the room. Let's see what's going on.
This was hair versus no hair.
Give me a year.
Shirts
I'll be
versus
joining
skins.
in,
It's just like de-evolution of people.
but- Wow, he put you at the end.
I'm after you now. That's, man,
That was
all right.
really good. So if you're watching the
Welcome
video,
back.
you get a treat. Welcome back, man.
Thank you.
It's been a
Yeah, it's
while
great to
since
be
we've
here.
had you here.
Yeah, I missed IGN.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit. Give folks sort of the background on your career, because you've done a lot of things.
Well, thank
This is your life.
where to begin? I used to the short story is I was a research assistant at Saturday Night Live, and I was freelancing jokes for Weekend Update. And I was at the point where I wanted to become a writer, but they just didn't have space at the time. And I think I was sort of like, I don't want to keep doing research. And then I got offered a job at Nintendo. So I moved to Seattle, worked at Nintendo as a localization writer in the Treehouse. And then I got a job from IGN, and I moved to San Francisco and did IGN. And then I got a job offer from Jimmy Fallon, which is where I am now.
Traitor.
Okay.
Trader, yeah.
Yeah, see, all I know about your life is from skits on Up at Noon.
That's right.
Weird
That's true to
confessionals
life.
about being sad at Christmas.
We did weird
and-
stuff together on that show.
Yeah.
It was so much
It
fun.
was really
There were some
fun.
really good ones in the past. I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember them. There were also things involving cereal and all sorts
Not
of
the
stuff.
podcast.
No,
not
no,
the
no.
podcast.
Yeah.
Like the ones you eat.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
what happened to Count Chocula.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they let us. You let us.
Yeah, you let
Yeah,
us.
what happened?
dive in our own weird brains for a while there. So
That was
No,
fun.
it's great. It was
It's
really cool
weird
because
stuff.
you had just come off of working at Nintendo,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I remember you had like just a desk full of really obscure Nintendo stuff,
Right.
Because there was some sort of like. What was like a company yard sale? Like, how does that work? You had Nintendo cereal. You had like
When I was at Nintendo, I don't know if they still do it, but they did every December. They had what they called the garage sale, where
Yeah.
they would just like sort of empty out their lockers of things they didn't need anymore. And they give all the money to charity. It was really nice. But like people would line up at like 5. Like I remember getting there 5 in the morning. There was like 12 people in front of me, and they're company employees. They're
Yeah.
people who
I
work
was
at
gonna
Nintendo.
say, this is not guys off the street.
Yeah.
No, well, the thing about Nintendo is everyone who works there is a fan of Nintendo.
Yeah.
You know, and not all of us were there 20 years. So, like, you'd see stuff, you're like, oh my God, it's like an original Nintendo, like in the box. Like, I remember one guy got it for like $30, like a fully boxed NES. So I got a lot of memorabilia from that. The cereal box, though, I got on eBay.
okay.
When I was at Nintendo,
Was
I
there
had
still
this thing.
cereal in it?
No, thank
Okay.
God. I would have probably tried some.
You would have eaten it.
But when I was at Nintendo, though, I had this thing where I was like, I'm going to build a Nintendo museum at my desk. And I like stole other desks and rolled them up and built this giant thing. And I was like, I'm going to be here forever. So I'm just going to build this giant museum. And then I left. Then I went to IGN. And I was like, I'm going to keep the museum here. I'm going to be here forever.
Yep.
And then like I left and I was like, I can't move this again. So I gave it to Audrey. And I was like, oh, Audrey will keep it at IGN forever. Then she went to Nintendo.
Oh man. So wait a minute.
This thing's a
were-
curse.
Yeah, it is cursed. So what were some of your favorite pieces? Like call out like the standout.
There was like a weird Mario TV. My favorite pieces were the pieces from before when Nintendo had like a style guide.
Yeah.
So like in the late 80s when Nintendo was like, go ahead and make things, and you had Mario with like weird faces and like the bodies weren't right, or you had like a Yoshi that looked like a monster. My favorite era of Nintendo, I think, is that era when they were like, we don't need to like control all of this. We can just make really bad cartoons and everything will be fine. Like I have original cell art from Captain N the Game Master,
man.
which was
Oh, man.
$5 whole on eBay.
Yeah. Quick heads up. There's a booth at San Diego Comic-Con every year, and probably New York Comic-Con,
Yeah.
that's just this guy sells like old cell art like that. And I
Yeah.
found one. He had Super Mario Super Show. He had Zelda, which was for some reason there was only 12 episodes of that show. I remember
Yeah.
it being way more than that.
Yeah, no, because
it
when you're a
leaves an impression.
kid,
When you're a kid, it's like it just seems like they're on. It's on for 5 years.
By
but-
the time you're on
Yeah.
the 4th episode, you forgot the first one, so it's
Yeah,
all
yeah,
new
yeah.
to you. Yeah.
No, but I really love all
Cyclical.
that because it's Mickey Mouse and Mario. They're so similar in so many ways, but a lot of that is also when you go back and look at the really early Mickey Mouse stuff, where he's just like really loose and squiggly, and he's
Right.
like, "Hey, everybody!" Like Mario is the same way, where you're like, "Are you running?" Like, but also losing weight, but your body, like half your body is fat.
Right,
but,
right.
You would see like a thermos that had Mario and Luigi on it, and you're like, "Okay, these guys guys actually kind of look like real plumbers
Right.
at this point.
Yeah.
You know, and now they're cartoon characters.
Before
so.
Bob Hoskins came
Yeah,
along,
yeah,
really
yeah.
made him look
Yep,
like a
yep,
plumber.
yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I've heard stories, and I think when it was announced that you were going to be on this episode, Trinan brought up something that you had given Audrey that basically they were like, she is not worthy. It was a lunchbox.
But yeah, there was a lunchbox and a thermos, like one of the originals from like '86 or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh man.
She, by the way, she sold her collection. She retired to an island. Yeah.
What's funny is I'm sure that collection is worth nothing. Like I'm sure like
Whatever.
emotionally it's worth everything, but I'm
Yeah.
sure if like there's some guy with some obese guy with like a price code who's like, this is only worth $17, it's not even worth it. Like
Yeah.
like I have a box of like all of the original Mario Brothers trading cards, worth nothing.
Yeah.
But they're just so nice to
But
have.
it's cool to flip through, right?
Yeah, it's cool to flip,
Yeah.
or it was when I owned it.
When you now it's gone. So you didn't bring any of that stuff with you to Fallon, did you?
I think what I brought, I had a inflatable bald bull that someone gave me from Super Punch
I
Out.
remember that.
You need
yeah.
to show that next
Yeah.
time Reggie's on the show.
Yeah.
Just saying, like, just walk up to him, let's see what happens.
So I brought
Yeah.
that with me. I brought what else did I bring? I think remember when we did Up at Noon with Keiji Inafune?
Yeah.
And he signed our Mega Man carts.
Yeah,
I brought that with me.
Well, no, he signed that for you. For me, he signed a bottle of Fleischmann's liquor.
Because we did Fleischmann.
Wait, what?
Well, because I pitched him. I
Oh,
pitched.
Fleischmann.
I
yeah.
pitched him Fleischmann, who's like an
vodka-based-
evil enemy robot based on vodka.
That's great. What were we doing?
I don't know.
If you're not a Mega Man fan, every Mega Man boss ends with man.
Man.
Yeah,
so it's
except for
Woodman,
Splash Girl.
Footman,
Yep.
Chicken Man.
Except for Splash Woman.
yeah, Splash Woman.
Wait,
Excuse me, I said girl.
They've never made a Fleisch Woman. You know, get on
Could be
that.
interesting.
Flashman
Yeah,
is
get on
awesome.
that. All right.
God.
Damn, that collection sounds amazing. Any white whales just to end before we move on? Like
Any white
anything that you
whales?
were like, I need to have this, but it costs too much money.
I still don't have a top-loading NES. I'd always like to get one, but it always just seems not worth it at the price.
How much are they going for?
I think they go for like a couple hundred.
Oh man, because I think they were $49.99 when I bought one.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, when they first came out.
Yeah, when they first came out, they were super cheap.
Right.
I remember getting that because most people bought the top-loading NES because they had to, because their regular
'Cause they're
NES
broke, yeah.
My regular NES by the end of that era, you had to. I would put a game in and then another game on top to push it down.
Right.
It down?
So if you didn't have two games, it just didn't work. So you had to shove all these things in it just to get it to work. But yeah, the top-loading one was cool.
Right.
Had the kind of rounded controller and stuff like that. I didn't realize that was like a rarity.
I think it's pretty rare.
Did you have to explain that to your mom? Like my mom would see something like that and be like, "What did you do? Did you break it?"
Oh,
like, she would
yeah.
like immediately go Bronx
Well,
woman on me.
when you plug any video game system into your TV and it doesn't work or something doesn't work anymore, your parents are like, "Your Nintendo broke the TV," and I'm like, "That's not possible. That never happens."
Well, I distinctly remember when Super Nintendo came out, one of the features that me and my friends talked about was that you didn't have to blow into the carts. Like that was like we weren't like, oh, the graphics are better or these games can be bigger. We were like, oh man, the games always work.
Well, if they could have put that in the box. Like some of them talk. You don't have to blow into the cards.
Which again, I know it doesn't work and is a myth, but
Yeah.
when you're 7, you think it does.
Yeah. No, that's God, it's so fascinating. I love I remember talking to people about the Super Nintendo when it first came out and just being able to be like, you can hear a harp now. Like some of the levels you could hear an instrument and it's not just beeps and fax machine noise.
I like it. All right, so Mike, let's talk a little bit then about your time at Treehouse specifically. What games did you work on while you were there?
The first project I worked on was the Mario Anniversary Collection for the Wii, and that was sort of a training wheels project because there wasn't any game to localize. I just got to localize the collector's book that came with it and some music tracks.
Was that the Super Mario All Stars reprint
for the Wii.
in the red
Yeah.
box
Yeah.
with the booklet and everything like
Right.
that? Oh, that was really cool.
So how do you localize it? Like, do you get like a sheet of kind of roughly translated Japanese script from Japan?
Because spoilers,
or-
you don't speak Japanese at all.
I
right?
do not speak Japanese.
Okay.
The way Nintendo does it is, you as the American English translator. There's also NOE, which will do like the British translation. Usually they go off the American one. Sometimes projects are different. But I would be paired with a translator who, often the translators are someone who was either Japanese but lived in America a long time, or like an American who lived in Japan or has parents of different citizenships. And what they would do is they translate something and be like, okay, this character's saying this, the accent they have in Japanese is a rough and tumble accent. So maybe you do like a Brooklyn accent or something. And then you as the American writer, you're like, okay,
Welcome,
so I'd make them
Meowth.
sound this way. But you know what I mean? Like, or cultural signifiers.
That's how we got Meowth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But little cultural signifiers, like it's not like they just put the script through Google Translate, then they're like, rewrite it. So you'd work with a translator, and then the translator also translates emails for you back and forth, and like communicates with Japan. It's a very close partnership between your team and NOE and NCL. But for something like that, you just get the PDF translated, and then you'd rewrite it, and then they'd check it. Especially that one was checked very closely because it was interviews with like Mr. Miyamoto and people like that. And when you're dealing with those people, they're very careful.
Yeah, you didn't want to just make stuff up.
No, but the cool thing with that project was,
But he did.
When we first
did.
pitched Yoshi, he was a drunk green horse.
nobody checked it and it got through, and that's canon now. That is now canon. He's a drunk horse.
They are very specific about stuff like that, like about how Yoshis are Yoshis.
Yoshi's a space dragon, I
and
think now.
Donkey Kong is not a monkey, right?
No, he's a Kong.
He's a Kong.
And that there's a style guide.
And he has to wear a tie because he's on a way to a job interview.
He's always just blew a job interview. Every game starts with him having a really bad job interview. Like he ended the job interview going, "Can I use the bathroom?" And they're like, "We're not going to hire you."
And then he gets mad and he kidnaps a woman, goes to the top of a construction site. The rest is history.
But they do have like a thick style guide that has like the gender of different characters. Not obviously the gender of characters but like
What's Mario?
Mario is a man.
Okay.
But they like bombs and stuff like that, and they also have like scale sizes. Like
What
they
are
even have like,
bombs? Are they boys or girls?
I think they're, if I remember, they're boys, but I could
they
be incorrect.
boys?
Yeah. I don't want to be wrong, and then like some fan is like, man, you didn't work at Nintendo at all.
I have to redraw my entire DeviantArt account.
But they have like the genders, and they have like the style guide is fascinating. They have like different sizes, like you can see like how big things like scale up. It was very cool.
Any surprises you remember?
No, you know what? It's more surprising. And maybe it's not surprising, but how well thought out it is.
Okay.
And nothing seems arbitrary.
Mario-verse?
Right. But it like how and they also have one for Zelda. They have one for all the different franchises, and it doesn't feel arbitrary. It's not like them trying to be strict. It was just them being like, we know exactly how he should look. Here's how he should size up. Here's how he should sound.
I remember reading about the production of Wreck-It Ralph,
Yeah.
where they were talking about getting Bowser in that, Villains Anonymous room.
Right.
And all the publishers were basically saying, well, our character is this tall. And the guys working on the movie were just like, oh, so everybody wants their character to be like 700 feet tall. But that's not going to work. We have to put a ceiling in this room somehow.
Right.
So they fit Zangief, Bowser, all these, M. Bison, all these other characters
Sure.
were in the room at the same time. But I think there was probably a little sort of ebb and flow on
Yeah.
on the actual style guide of scale there.
Sure, yeah.
It's an interesting scenario.
Well, and it makes you wonder too, because Nintendo internally has sort of, if you think about it, Smash Brothers just kind of puts them all on an even scale, right?
Yeah.
Just because of that, with the exception of Olimar, who the game portrays him as a much smaller creature, but
Yeah.
in
Right,
Smash
right.
Brothers he's enormous for some
Which is
reason.
weird because like they'll scale him up, but like the idea of getting Ridley to be the size of Bowser is like no.
Oh heck no! No, we're not doing that. Yeah, no. Okay, fair. So you worked on Mario Collection,
yeah.
Mario Party 9.
I worked on Mario Party 9. I was the lead on Mario Party 9. I got to name Pizza Me Mario. That is the mini game that will go on my tombstone.
All right.
That was
Another
fun.
name of pizza.
No, but those projects were always fun because you'd have big meetings with a lot of writers.
How Drucker laughs.
Like very
best.
loud and shrilly.
It is the best. It's my favorite.
But we used to hear this from the studio all
It's
the
one
time.
of my favorite laughs in the world.
Yeah.
You've just lost all your listeners.
You had to
forgot.
hear Drucker laugh from the studio because no one else in there would. We brought in an audience every week that just never got to that level.
Oh, Greg Atlas.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He still comes in every now and then.
I know you listen.
Hey, Greg. What was it? Oh, no. The cool thing about stuff like Mario Party 9 is you'd have these really fun meetings where you'd either play videos or you'd have a working prototype of the game and you'd be like, what should we name this? And everyone's throwing out puns and it's almost like this own, it's like, I know it sounds like a pun, but like a naming party. Like everyone's like having great ideas and it's really fun. Those were some of the most fun moments at Nintendo. And that happens, at least when I was there. I can't speak for this, now.
Of course.
5 years later. But when I was there, it'd be like, okay, we have these new enemies in a Kirby game. What should, in the Japanese, they want to name it this. They want to keep this quality of it, and we want the name to also reference this. What should we do? And then you have like a whiteboard where people are just naming names. And that was a lot of fun.
So you're standing in front of a grown man and you're like, Waddle-dee-poo.
Yeah, but exactly.
Wonkle-dee-winky.
But that's exactly what it, and people are like, yeah! And then they're like, no. But it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And, then you like give it to Japan and they're like, okay, well, what about this? And it's like a back and forth. The cool thing about at least Nintendo is you're always working very closely with them and like everyone just wanted to make a good game. Like it never felt like corporate where they're like, well, this is better for marketing. It felt like they were more like, okay, let's try to make it fun.
Was there any 11th hour sort of, we have no idea, we're running on this has to get out like now? Because that seems to happen, right? These schedules can be complicated. There are milestones and things they have to hit at certain times.
I think not when at least not on projects I worked on. I remember I'm responsible for the name Groose in Zelda, which is my only claim to fame.
Really?
Yeah.
We need to talk about this. Okay.
I mean, but it was one of those naming meetings. They were like, he's a bully. We want him to sound like everyone has to have a bird type name. The theme was birds in Skyward Sword.
Right.
And so they were like, okay, we want him to have a name that implies that he's a bird and that he's like a bully. And I was like, well, what about mixing Goose with Bruce? And we call him Groose. And they were like, okay, sure, yeah. And that was like, oh, I've named a Zelda character. Okay,
Wow.
that's pretty
Wow.
awesome. Yeah.
And that's
the only the most of merit thing I did.
Okay. No, but when you think about Groose, I know, I read a lot of forums, and that name consistently comes up as a character that everyone liked in Skyward Sword for the most
I
part.
didn't write his dialogue. I mean, that's all the localization and the team doing that, but I gave him the name, so I can take more credit than I deserve.
That's awesome.
Nice. That is very awesome.
Well, you were working there around the time the Zelda timeline started coming to bubbling up, right? Was it like right before, or
It might have been. I might have been there right before,
Okay.
or there were rumblings of it. I was never involved in any of those meetings that discussed that, and I think that was all decided by Japan.
Yeah.
But I can't be certain.
Yeah, because I remember that was the first time where I was just like, oh man, there's a multiverse here. This
Yeah.
There's a cinematic universe. This is nuts.
I still don't fully understand.
No,
I've
and you
read it
never
like
will.
3 or 4 times, and I'm like, so Link dies, but then he comes back again.
Well, there was Anthony Gallegos, who used to work here, used to always say that the Legend of Zelda story is basically some kid with a green shirt wakes up and he has to do some stuff. And as long as you get those bullet points down, you can go anywhere in the universe.
Right.
It's funny you bring up not understanding it, though, because this weekend I finished Twilight Princess HD, and I whipped open the Hyrule Historia. And I'm like, okay, so what happens next on the timeline?
Right.
It's like, oh, Four Swords Adventures. Of course it
I'm
is.
glad you're all caught up for the story now. For Four Swords Adventures.
I'm like, perfect. Why not, right? But it just caught me by surprise. because I was like, this. Sometimes you open that book and you just get an answer. You're like not satisfied.
Right,
with.
right,
Because
right.
I think the idea of playing through all of them chronologically is, I don't know anyone that's ever done that. That's
Well, they
just
also
such a-
branch
tried.
out.
So
You
then
can't.
I tried and we gave up. But no, I love the, you've got this dark moment with midnight and the mirror shattering and all that. And then the next chapter is Link splits into 4 and throws himself off a cliff repeatedly, right? That's the kind of story arc you
exactly.
get.
No, totally. Okay, so then let's talk about quite possibly the last game you worked on when you were there. Kid Icarus Uprising.
Well, technically, I worked on Mario Party 9 after Kid Icarus.
Okay.
But I worked on Kid Icarus Uprising, which was a lot of fun. That was a Sakurai project, and that's a very interesting project to work on because he is like a mad scientist.
Okay.
You know, I guess everyone listening to this probably knows he's the Smash Brothers guy.
Yes, that's
and,
right.
Kid Icarus Uprising was sort of an in-between project, which for him is still a giant, long project. And it was interesting because it's almost like I got on it not at the very start of development, but very early on in development.
Okay.
And he already had everything in his head mapped out. So it wasn't there, it wasn't playable yet, but like everything that was in the final game was on a sheet of paper with him saying, okay, this is going to happen, there's going to be this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to sacrifice hearts, and it's going to be harder. And it's almost like he knew everything about the game before it was even programmed.
Wow.
So awesome dude.
So then how do you approach, and I guess for the most part Japan kind of presented what the story would be, but how do you approach writing Palutena and Pit as fresh characters for a series that had not been heard of for years?
I think a lot of it was, and I was also the secondary writer on it, so I did a lot of it, but I wasn't like the lead on it, so I can't take all the credit for the quality of it. That goes to the lead. But a lot of that game, if you play it, a lot of it is them making fun of how long it's been. There's a lot of jokes about that. I think early on in development, Sakurai had the idea for that, and I think at first people thought it was weird, but on the American side, we're like, no, please, let's go meta with this. There aren't, Smash is kind of meta, but besides that, there aren't a lot of meta Nintendo games, at least in my mind. So we went with it and we ran with it and we tried to make it funny. And I think it wasn't like, how do we bring back these characters for fans? We're like, okay, how do we make these characters as new characters and just reference that they've existed for a while?
That game in particular is hilarious to me because for the longest time, covering Nintendo back back in the N64 days and playing games before then, Nintendo games were always very restrained when it came to dialogue.
Yes,
right?
yes,
Like
yes.
the characters say very little. I mean, Link
Right.
says nothing.
Yeah.
Samus for the longest time didn't say anything until
Right.
she started ranting about babies.
I mean, in Zelda 2, they literally can only say what can fit in the dialogue boxes.
Right. I am
and then
error.
here comes this game, and it's so freaking chatty.
Right.
I mean, that is the chattiest video game
very
out there.
chatty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was almost like GTA levels of like you're
Yeah.
listening to a radio station while
Yeah.
you're driving around,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's just like this whole talk radio thing going on. But it's the main characters talking to each other. I thought it was like such a sort of refreshing take on anything they'd ever done before, and especially as somebody that grew up with Kid Icarus to all of a sudden be like, oh wait, now there's like like a comedic subplot to this.
And I think Sakurai, to his credit, was like, this is basically a new IP.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a new IP, but nobody, outside of maybe 12 people on the internet, nobody was like, oh man, they messed up Kid Icarus.
Yeah.
Like, it was by and large a new IP, and that gave Nintendo, in my mind, a lot of room to do new things.
Yep.
Again, like, that's all Sakurai's credit. I don't have any of the credit for that, but it was still a lot of fun to work on.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me just how he then took that and in Smash Brothers for Wii U,
Yeah.
and for Wii U, because I don't think this appears in 3DS, Palutena and Pit have exchanges.
Yeah.
Where, just like Solid Snake and the Colonel did in
Yeah.
Brawl,
Yeah.
they sort of talk about the other character in the room. And
Yeah.
it's a funny little nod to something that was done in that game.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I remember casting that. It was a lot of fun, like listening to different voice actors. It was such a cool process to like.
Oh, you got to sit in on that part too?
I didn't get to sit on the casting. I got to like listen to the
Yeah.
voice files and like give my opinion and be like, oh, I think that guy sounds cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I had no idea that the writers got that sort of like that they get to hover into certain sections like that too.
At least when I was there, localization writers, you do a lot. I mean, you're not just writing, you're also working with the marketing team to be like, oh, this is what the game's about. And you're working with Nintendo of Europe because, the British side might be like, oh, you say this, but we'd phrase this differently, or it'd be confusing.
Right.
Or, and you also work with the Latin American translators and the French Canadian translators. It's a very interconnected company. Like it's not just like you'd write the game and give it to somebody and then like some intern would take it to someone else. It's like, okay, you know everything about the game, so you're going to help us design the box.
Sure. And I think that's like a lot of people, and myself included, have been like reductive about how localization works.
Yeah.
Because it's something where you go like, well, Japan, growing up obviously as a Nintendo fan,
Yeah.
you would get it. It wasn't unheard of to get a game a year after Japan did, or especially with stuff
Sure,
like
yeah.
RPGs, and you just be like, well, just get in there and just like change it all to English, and it's like obviously it's not. It's not just
It's
that,
not just
right?
that,
So
yeah.
the different. I didn't. So like even the voice acting thing is kind of an important part of it.
Right.
I think if you're writing, even if you're writing for a TV show or something, you don't always necessarily get to sit in on who ends up delivering the lines you're writing.
Well, there's also like, the difference between, and again, I don't speak for Nintendo now, and I only speak for my experience there, so I'm not like a company representative.
Sure.
But, the difference is like in the 80s, like when you saw like an anime show on television, that was because some company bought the rights to that show, and then they were like, okay, how can we cheaply translate this?
Right.
But Nintendo's all one company.
Yeah.
So, they're not giving us a finished project, or they weren't giving me a finished project and I translate it, then give it to them, and they're like, good, done. It's like, okay, here's what I wrote. And usually NCL has people who speak English who are like, okay, you wrote this. What does this mean? Or why would you make this change? Or, oh, we like this a lot. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of gates that are being checked to make sure like nobody's going crazy on the project. It's a very close collaboration.
Yeah, and if you look back just at the company's history, I feel like we didn't get that sort of fine crafted localization from Nintendo until the mid '90s.
Right.
With games like Earthbound specifically, that's one of
That's
the crown jewels of
And
like,
the reason it's called
localization.
Treehouse is because it started to form around when Donkey Kong came out.
Right.
When Donkey Kong Country came out, so they had the Treehouse and Donkey Kong, and that sort of stuck as the name of that group.
Which I think
Nice.
maybe I'm wrong, but I think the first time or the closest we've ever actually come to seeing Treehouse.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, you just can't. I went on
There's security doors and
I went on a tour. Jose and I were at NOA last year, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for a Splatoon project.
And
yeah.
we went on took us around a tour, which by the way, like it's just awesome because it's a beautiful green building. It's
Yeah.
so cool. And it's also like having grown up getting, big things in the mail from Redmond, Washington
Yeah.
with pictures of my favorite characters on it. And then going to visit is really cool. And they have their whole store there that the employees
Yeah.
go down to. But there was not even a slim of tiniest chance of being like, can we go check out Treehouse?
Yeah.
But I remember in the 90s, Nintendo Power sent out these VHS tapes for Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah.
and they did this walk through this hallway where you could see all the artwork that Nintendo Power got, because people sent in envelope art, and they were like, "This is Treehouse," or they made some reference to it. And that's the closest we've gotten to like actually seeing inside those doors. It's a highly secretive place.
I think once when I was there, they did Halloween for kids. You know, like a company Halloween where like kids could come in and trick or treat.
Yeah.
And they opened up Treehouse, and like everyone was very careful to like put away their prototypes. You had to like shut off anything you were working on. They're very, very careful about security.
Even to the people that work at Nintendo.
Yeah, but like if you're
in
bringing
separate
like
buildings, right?
I think they were just afraid like if you brought in like an 8-year-old, you know, who's excited about Nintendo, that he might be like, oh, I saw, you know. We weren't working on a Kirby game, but I saw a new Kirby game, and then tell his friends. Then like someone posted online, and that becomes a whole thing.
To be the one guy in history or the one kid in history who's like, my uncle works at Nintendo. And he's right.
I remember this happening a few times where, you know, schoolyard talk turns into something online, and then somebody says, oh, this kid from this guy who works at Nintendo, and the dad's probably like,
exactly.
What was it? Was it Cecil in Final Fantasy II?
I don't know, but for me it was when Smash Brothers 4 was in development, and every other week someone or their grandma made a friggin' like, here's your roster, here's the blurry shot, oh my god, they got Ridley this time, and all that sort of nonsense, which made me just want to put my head through a wall. No, but thank you so much for sharing. Like it's really good to hear about just that process. I guess my last question to you is, did you ever expect to work for Nintendo? I mean, like, what was that like? Like, did you decide to apply? Was just like a recommendation thing, if you don't mind me asking?
I had a friend there who I used to do comedy with, and he was like, hey, they're looking for somebody who might be able to do like a lighter tone. Maybe possibly leading up to Kid Icarus, but he didn't say that. Because, you know, a lot of people who get into video games like writing more serious stuff, you know, like fantasy stuff and like a little more, you know, purpley RPG prose. And they're like, we want someone who's a bit more goofy. And I was at the end of the season at SNL as an assistant, and I was like, yeah, I'll apply. We'll never get it. And I remember even in the first interview I did an interview with one of the people in the Treehouse, and it went so well that at the end of the interview, he's like, great, it was great talking to you. And I was like, yeah, all right, well, I hope you hire somebody. Like, in my head, I thought, I'm not going to get this job. Not because I wasn't qualified, but I just thought, like, working at Nintendo was something someone else did. And they hired me, and they were super cool. They're also, I should say, you know, even though I don't work there anymore, they're an awesome company to work for. Like, of video game companies, they're just super nice to everybody. The last story is, when I worked there, they got a new building. Not because I was there, but because
that'd be cool.
They just happened to open up
and ruin the old one.
The headquarters you visited is different than the headquarters you saw in the old Nintendo Power.
Right. Yes, yeah. It was. They pulled like a Yankee Stadium thing where they built the old one in the new one's parking lot, or whatever, right? Yeah,
and
or vice versa.
Before they demolished it, they had a paintball game in the old building.
I've heard about this.
And I got to play in that paintball game, and I got shot in the nuts. Really, am I allowed to say that? But I got, and it hurt more than anything. I've had a trunk door shut on my head. I don't know who did it, because you're wearing a mask.
The trunk door?
But I just remember that being like this moment where I was like, it was 2 weeks into work there, I was like, oh my god, I'm at Nintendo. We had a paintball fight in old Nintendo headquarters, and I got shot right in the nuts, and I was like, I hate this.
Was Reggie in this fight?
Reg definitely played. I don't know what team he was on.
Maybe Reggie shot you in the nuts with a paintball. That's a sentence I got to say.
Story. That's
I
the
doubt
story.
it. I'm sure it was just some person.
So this was way before Splatoon, right?
This was way before Splatoon.
I wonder if they had any idea that this was
that was going to be a thing.
They were basically prototyping a
paintball, man.
Right.
Like, just that sounds. I heard about this one. I think when we were up there, someone had mentioned it to us, and I was like, "Really? That sounds rad."
It was really cool.
Yeah, it's really.
It was really
hear.
cool, but it hurt.
It's all fun and games until somebody shoots you in the nuts.
All right.
Does it still hurt?
Well,
I mean, the thought of it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk a little bit about Paper Mario and the good and bad of that series. More when we come back.
Cool.
Here we go.
Welcome back. Jose Otero here with Per Schneider, Brian Altano, and special guest Mike Drucker.
Hello.
So, gentlemen, I would love to talk to you guys about Paper Mario Color Splash. I almost said Splash.
Color Schwartz.
Splash.
Color Splash.
Super. So this week, or last week, excuse me, Nintendo announced that a new chapter in the Paper Mario series is coming out. And much to my surprise, I discovered after the fact, because we recorded our episode right after the Direct, is that people are actually really concerned about this game. Now, I don't want to focus just on the negativity here, but we are going to talk about it. But I do want to talk about, in the larger sense, Paper Mario as a series. Right?
Sure.
What has the series done right, and where has the series been not so right?
Right.
So the concerns specifically are about some folks are worried that this is going to be Sticker Star 2, which to them is a bit problematic because Sticker Star's battle system, Sticker Star's approach, was it was very different from a traditional RPG, which is where Paper Mario started. So let's talk a little bit about this. Like based on what you saw, first of all, like, are you guys concerned?
I mean, personally, I think it never got as good again as during the GameCube era, right? Like Paper Mario was just clever. The whole like buddy system was great. Character development, battle system, presentation, all of that came together in games like Thousand Year Door.
Right.
And then it went lighter afterwards, right?
Super
and,
Paper Mario.
Yeah, and like it did a little bit more action. It left the RPG roots behind, and I think that's ultimately where people are going to have different opinions, right? Some people really like the RPG aspects more than anything, and some people don't mind a game that's a little bit more action oriented, less about leveling up and developing characters.
I'm kind of with them on that, because the more, or I'll say the less Paper Mario is an RPG and the more become an action platforming game, I'm like, well, you already make really good action platforming Mario games.
Right.
And
better controlling ones. Yeah, I completely agree.
And you end up it's like, and I think I've said this before on the show, but you end up having this sort of jack of all trades, master of none, where it's not a fantastic RPG and it's not a fantastic platforming game. And if I want to play a platforming Mario, like there's 30 different. I mean, I can play Mario Maker. There's
like 6.5 million courses.
Right.
Exactly.
But there's also right now I think a lot of people are looking at the footage and basing all their opinions on a couple of seconds of footage, right? Like it does look more action oriented. You're seeing the card system, right?
Yeah.
You're seeing a little bit of a gimmick of swiping the cards from the gamepad,
and sending them up.
And so I think that's what a lot of people are reacting to. We don't actually know exactly what this game will be like.
Bill did introduce it in the North American Direct as an action adventure and not an RPG, and that I think is the exact wording that made some folks.
Do you think that's it?
Oh man, like what is happening? I really liked how Paper Mario used to be.
But I'm sure that's carefully chosen, right? Like it's not like role-playing game is a dirty word, and for Nintendo they have used it for strategy RPG, for Fire Emblem, right? And I don't know. It could be that they looked at their portfolio and said we had Xenoblade, we had we had Fire Emblem, so we need something a little bit more action oriented for our catalog, and so they're stressing that angle more than anything. But I mean, looking at the game, it does look more action-oriented. There's not a lot of development other than HP.
I think there's totally room for games like this in this genre, right? Like when South Park Stick of Truth came out, it was one of my favorite games that year because it was like, I want an RPG, but I don't have 80 hours. So I played something like that, and I'm like, this totally works. It's just as actiony as it is RPG. The problem is that game didn't really have any sort of significant roots of being like, this wasn't the 7th South Park RPG in the series where they could take some liberties. So I think people do want, like, it's weird because I do want that 11-hour long, 12-hour long, 15-hour long action RPG.
Right.
But I totally understand why people do want what Paper Mario used to be.
And South Park is more linear too, right? And one thing you saw in the footage, like if you look at the Japanese Direct too, there are a couple of different scenes. There's an overworld map that you move on, right? Which is a little bit more like classic Mario Brothers and less like a role-playing game.
And I think that some fans are a little concerned, because they liked having like, a partner who had a quirky personality, and you'd meet different people and you'd explore towns that had like, weird qualities to them. Like if you look at Thousand Year Door, there's a lot of like areas that are like, oh, this is like a creepy town, which fits in with the Mario universe, but is still a fun place to explore. Yeah. And I think, for some people, I'm sure that the fear is just that with an overworld and stuff like that, it's just you have little levels, and you don't necessarily have that same sense of scale that you got from a Paper Mario game in the past.
Yep.
And also there's maybe the fear that like, Mario, there's Mario and Luigi, and that's your Mario RPG. And then you have Paper Mario, which is your in-between game. Again, like you said, a master of none. And I think that's the fan concern. I mean, it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything
really
about
nice.
it yet.
I love the look.
And also like the deck system could be much more fun than the sticker system as a battle system.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think, it's always hard with Nintendo Directs because people are like, oh, I don't want to play this Metroid game because there's 4 people. It's like, yeah, but it might be. That's what you said about Prime when it was a first-person shooter, that you didn't want to enjoy it.
I can attest to that.
Remember
there was
that?
a lot of hate,
So, I mean, there's part of me that
Or when
like...
Wind Waker was a cartoon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll always be a Nintendo fanboy, so I'm always going to give them, a lot of room. I think that we need to see more before we can say, like, oh, they ruined it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I do think that for the longest time, Paper Mario has been an action-oriented RPG, like not so much, the same as you would particularly call an RPG, what you expect an RPG to be. But I will say, is part of this potentially this differentiating factor, trying to make Paper Mario different, just a realization with the Nintendo that the Mario and Luigi RPG series is basically the same thing. It is sort of a turn-based RPG with action-y sort of elements, and I don't think that I don't think the two of them can coexist side by side. Someone probably listening would say they absolutely can, but I think maybe for Nintendo, it's a differentiating play. Maybe it's just, hey, we need this to be different. But unfortunately, like, that does take something that, you know, for better or worse, like Thousand Year Door is considered the best chapter of that series. Right? Folks who really want a part 2 to that, or a game that follows that note for note, are disappointed because they don't know what to expect from this game based on the very little they saw.
Yeah, and that's the same story with Metroid. We talked about that before, right? Like, if there was a clear path to getting, you know, a sequel to a beloved game, I think fans would be a little bit less antsy and a little bit less, quick to judge a game based on, 10 seconds of footage. But there is that worry that Nintendo also, is running out of time on this platform and needs to downscale some of the projects. It is usually, like Zelda games accepted, it is easier to crank out an action game than it is a role-playing game, right?
Sure, yeah, of course.
Development time-wise. And so, yeah, remember when we had a game called Super Mario RPG and we didn't get the sequel to that, right? But we did eventually get a Paper Mario game that we fell in love with. So, things have to be allowed to change over time, too.
Yeah.
I do like Paper Mario a lot better than Mario and Luigi, so I'm hoping it's not that the one is pushing the other one out.
Sure. So why don't we talk a little bit then about what Paper Mario has done right, like either from the outset on the 64 or the GameCube version, or even the more action-y or very different systems of like Super Paper Mario or Sticker Star. Like what were some of your favorite things from these games?
Battle system.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about, like, we all love the active time battles and the, and Super NES Final Fantasies, and they took that kind of concept and then added action to it so that your button presses were even more meaningful. I thought they did an amazing job with that.
Yeah.
Well, I also think the way that they tie in the aesthetic with everything.
Yeah.
And you can even say that even if you don't like Sticker Star, it worked, like, at least the visuals, there's like a cohesive thing to it. The stickers and the cards in the new game. I've always loved the visuals of it. I mean, if you look at Paper Mario on the 64, it's one of the few 64 games that holds up visually.
Yep. There's always like to sort of piggyback on that too. Like the sort of the art style and the animation is wonderful, and it adds a great layer to the humor. Like watching an enemy get hit and then just kind of fold and flutter away, or like when a guy's just sitting there and he shakes and just falls backwards. Like it's like he's like a wooden prop on a play or something like that. Is great. The writing has always been really good, really fun. Especially everyone remembers Super Paper Mario, like that internet message board troll guy.
Or like the dragon's eye and how it was loading, and it was the eShop loading like circle.
It's
it was
just so smart, very clever.
No, I completely agree. I played this weekend, and there were the jokes like when Paper Mario is going to bed, and he just like folds between the sheets. Like no one ever has to fix a bed in that world.
I know.
There's like little jokes like that.
It's great.
And then I was also playing Thousand Year Door, and I have to agree, the sidekick is always a really cool thing. Like it was Goombaria.
Yes.
And it was like, what? This is like you're. Although they did that twice, because Paper Mario also had Goombario, I think was his name, and it was like a Goomba who is all of a sudden your ally. Meanwhile, all the regular Mario games, you're stomping these things out of existence. I just want to point out.
I hope they don't see those.
But they don't hold that against you in the Paper Mario universe. And I even loved for the 64 version how when you first arrive at Peach's castle, I want to think this was intentional, but it felt like that lobby you enter in Mario 64. Like the doors with the stars on them, and there's certain placement of them. I was just saying, like, I guess they were going for this. Like, I'm not sure if they were officially or not.
It did a lot right with kind of just referencing the regular Mario universe, first of all, right? Like, and they obviously were able to take a different take with this different art style. But then, the dialogue between you and the sidekicks was just really good. You felt like all of them had different personalities. That was very, very successful. And that's something that we see in games like Fire Emblem, too, right? Nintendo's really good at creating these characters, and depending on how much time you invest, you really get to know them.
And the way they sort of, there's a Goomba, basically they tattle on the enemy you're about to fight, or they have something to say about everyone and every place that you visit. And I also thought that was a fun touch, because here you have almost a tour guide, where if you're someone who isn't familiar with the way the Mario games work, or want a little more information on some of these settings that they basically made up for the Paper Mario series, you have someone there who's going to tell you about it. And I think that was a smart way to do it. Cool.
So
Cool.
yeah, I would like more of that too.
Yeah.
I would love another Super Mario RPG follow-up Paper Mario game.
Yeah, someday.
But, you know, at the same time, I'm excited to see some lighter fare like this too.
Yeah.
More than that, I kind of expect it. Like, I feel like, honestly, right? I feel like the Wii U is done, and so you're getting this kind of end of life cycle. Game lineup for the machine, and like I know they're fans of Kirby. Somebody tweeted at me, awesome.
Oh, we got a few letters in too. We don't have them ready to read.
Did you guys insult Kirby?
No, I basically said, is there anybody out
sucks.
there who's sitting here going like, you know, I cannot wait for the next Kirby game. I'm gonna buy a Wii U for the next Kirby game. The same way you would get with like Mario or Zelda, right? Like, because Kirby is like a lighter kind of.
There's one guy with like a Kirby tattoo, and it's got the angry eyebrows from like the Japanese box.
No, they are.
the
They
other arm
absolutely
has the
are.
happy-
But I always feel like they're when a console comes to the end of its life cycle, the Kirby ratio goes rapidly up.
You've never said this on this show before.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
That's funny.
I think that's accurate.
Remember,
I think
the last game on N64 was
DS
Kirby
too.
too.
There was a mass
the,
attack.
he's the life vest on the Titanic.
Quickly deploy the Kirbys.
Inflate the rafts.
All right. Well, I'm glad we got to talk about that.
Yeah.
If you have feedback on Paper Mario Color Splash, I would just say, at least in my mind, I'm going to give it a little more time.
Yeah.
Granted, I don't think you're wrong for like being a little concerned, but I think there's still time for this story to be told.
Sure.
Yeah. So hopefully the next time we see it, we get to find out a little bit more about what this thing's going to be. Mike, thank you so much for coming on
Thank
the
you for
program.
having me, Mike.
It's so
Yeah.
good to have you here.
Yeah.
So tell the folks where they can find your work and just what's going on with you right now.
You can find me on Twitter at Mike Drucker,
Okay.
MikeDrucker. I'm also on Twitch, Mike Drucker, just the same name. I also have a podcast called How to Be a Person. Brian's been on it.
Yeah.
It's a fun podcast I do with another Tonight Show writer named Jess Dweck, where we figure out how to do human things.
Nice.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah.
Well, you're also starting a
Hamilton podcast about
after
Hamilton.
my
Are
own
you
heart.
seriously?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. I am so happy about this.
It's me, Jess Dweck, and then a Daily Show writer named Trayvon Free.
Okay.
And it's called The Room Where It's Happening. It's going to be on Earwolf, probably in April.
That's
Wow,
awesome.
that is so
So
awesome.
cool.
I wish you nothing but luck for that.
Thank
I
you.
definitely, as a big fan of the show, will be listening to that.
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for listening to Nintendo Voice Chat. Leave us feedback on iTunes or email us at nvc@ign.com. You can find us on Twitter. You can find Brian Altano at,
Agent Bizzle.
and you can find Pear at.
Pair IGN.
You can find myself, Jose_Otero. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week with more Nintendo Voice Chat.
Bye.